Hi everyone, I'm Max from AFM. Welcome to the AFM Leadership Interview Series. The AFM platform is used by aviation and pilot training industry organizations to stay up to date with the latest trends and insights. In this interview series, we speak with industry leaders to learn more about their organization and their views. Today, I have the great pleasure to be joined by Dev Punj, Vice President at Chimes Aviation Academy. Chimes Aviation Academy is one of the largest flight training organizations in India and a pilot training partner of Indigo Airlines. Dev, for everyone listening, can you provide an introduction to Chimes Aviation Academy and its pilot training infrastructure?
Sure. Hi, Max. Great to be here. Thanks for having me. And so Chimes Aviation was founded in 2008, and we really looked at getting into pilot training because there was a real lack of good training infrastructure in India. So, there was the few pilots that Indian aviation did require would usually do their training in the US, looking for a much higher quality of training. And, through the early 2000s, there was a huge growth in Indian aviation with a lot of airlines coming up. Kingfisher, Indigo, of course, started in 2006. And, so the demand for trained pilots was just increasing rapidly through the early 2000s. So this was an opportunity that we felt was something that would really, was required in India, especially something that had a really good training infrastructure and high safety standards. So that's where the thought process we went into it with was, building something that didn't really exist in India at that time. So we opened our doors in early 2008, and we were greeted by the global financial crisis, which obviously also led to a crisis in global aviation as such. So, when we first opened, we actually had 10 aircraft and 8 students. So it was almost that a student could pick their aircraft for their whole CPL journey. But so we faced these kind of challenges in the initial years, and they were slightly more compounded by the closure of Kingfisher, followed by Jet Airways in India. But by the time 2011 came around, the sector started to kind of pick up in India. And since we had stuck with our core principles of just really focusing on quality and a safe experience, as the sector opened up in 2011, the market kind of recognized that. And so after that, we had a pretty good experience with a high number of applications for us. For the seats we had available. Um, so, we went through the 2010s, and then as our cadets joined airlines in India and abroad, even airlines in India kind of saw that we are a quality proposition. And so in 2019, we signed up with Indigo for the Indigo Cadet program. Again, right after we signed up in late 2019, and then as everyone knows, early 2020, the world was hit with COVID. So, that took a little while to actually properly kick off. But, we saw that India really had that demand for pilots, and that there was a lot of people just going abroad more, again, for a lack of infrastructure. So we opened our second base, as well as almost doubling our fleet in 2022, as we really saw that as an opportune time for Indian aviation, especially with the huge growth that both Indigo and Air India were going through. So that's really a quick summary of our history. Currently, we have about 150 cadets with us at any given time between our two bases. And we operate 24 aircraft at the moment, but we have options over the next few years of adding on another 70 possibly. So yeah, I guess we'll see where that goes over the next few years. In terms of our flying hours, we just to give you a comparison, in 2008 when we started with a fleet of 10, we were doing between 3 and 4 thousand hours in a year. But today, I mean, not today, but we're in the start of January. So for 2024, we just closed the year with over 27,000 hours of flying. So yeah, it's been a good journey and excited for what's to come.
It's absolutely fantastic. And, I've been following Chimes for a while and just phenomenal to see the growth of the organization over the years. Um, One of the things which also really stands out with Chimes is I know over the since 2019, Chimes has also built quite a strong team within the flight training organization, where you have really talented professionals from the airline industry, from kind of other sectors, which are really like working towards delivering like very efficient, very high quality uh, uh, flight training, especially across the two bases as well. Um, so that is something that has always kind of really stood out to me. In relation to that as well, I think it's super interesting just for everyone who's listening. India, a country of 1.4 billion people, has, and Dev, please correct me if I'm wrong here, 36 different flight schools, correct? Or only 36 flight schools?
Yep, only 36 of them. Yep. And of
And
those 36 also, I would say, probably 5 or 6 have more than 7 aircraft, 6 to 7 aircraft. So, the type of flight schools that can really cater to the demand that an airline has, I would say in India right now, we're probably sub 10.
it is phenomenal how such a large country with so many aircraft on order uh, has a flight training industry which really holds a lot of potential for growth. So absolutely interesting to hear how you have options to significantly increase your fleet. I know in 2024 you already made some announcements kind of indicating your fleet growth and how you're going to staff the increasing operations. Can you give everyone kind of an indication of key announcements and initiatives that you announced in 2024 and that you're working on?
Yeah, sure. So, well, first thing that comes to mind is we have expanded our fleet in 2024. We've brought in one more multi-engine DA-42. We've brought in one Cessna 172, and we've inducted a new aircraft into our fleet as well, which is the Tecnam P2010. So on the Tecnam, we've brought in 4 of them right now, and we're hoping to bring in more this year and next year. But I mean, the Tecnam is the P2010 is a fairly new aircraft in the Indian ecosystem. So we will be flying it a lot this year to see, if I mean, it should be suitable. I'm sure it will be suitable, but and then we can hopefully increase those numbers as well. Another big announcement for us was, we've increased our allocation in the Indigo Cadet program. We're at 120 cadets a year now for Indigo, and that really puts us up there in terms of their providers. And we're, very proud of that and working hard to make sure that we deliver those numbers to Indigo. And lastly, we are actively looking for a third base because we feel that we're getting to a saturation point on our first 2 bases, and we still have a lot to do for Indian aviation in terms of producing the pilots that are required by airlines. So we're actively looking for a third base in India, and hopefully, should have some good news for you towards this year, hopefully towards the middle of this year.
One other initiative that you announced last year, which really stood out to me, was around the flight instructors, because I know one of the key challenges with all of the growth of the Indian aviation sector is really kind of staffing flight training operations. Can you give more insights, firstly, maybe into the challenges, why there is not as many flight instructors as in other regions of the world, and then also how Chimes is looking to tackle that situation?
Sure. So, there is a huge deficit of flight instructors in India, largely because, there's no requirement of having a certain amount of hours. Like in the US, you have a 1,500-hour rule to join an airline. So, most, and especially considering the demand for pilots today in India, a lot of our cadets, as soon as they get their CPL issued, are picked up by an airline. As a result, you don't have that pipeline of instructors that a lot of other countries do have. So, and finding cadets whose dream is always to fly a 172 or a single engine aircraft is a tall order. Nobody, goes to get their CPL dreaming of constantly flying a 172. Everyone wants to get into the cockpit of an Airbus or a Boeing or these large aircraft, and justifiably so. So as a result, you have a fairly a large deficit of instructors. So one thing that Indigo has really helped us out with is they've launched the Indigo instructor retention program with us, which gives cadets a pathway into Indigo with their type rating being taken care of, but they must serve as instructors on the Indigo cadet program for 2 years before that. So I think that gives them also, a lot more flying hours to when they get into the cockpit of a Airbus, but also gives us stability in terms of having a solid team of instructors who, can really knowing that they're there for 2 years, they really get into it and really invest their time and their mental capacity into becoming good instructors rather than just biding their time. So that's been a really good development for us in this last year as well, and we hope to carry on for many more years.
And I think really what I saw as another unique thing about Chimes is Chimes Aviation Academy is also investing into the flight instructors, right? So that program that you announced, right, also includes a component where Chimes does invest in individuals who will then stick with Chimes for a couple of years before they join Indigo, correct?
Yeah, definitely. We take care of all the certifications they require to become instructors. Once they're accepted into the program, of course, then all their costs in terms of becoming instructors, their patter flying, all of that is taken care of by Chimes. And we also give them training with our existing instructors in terms of how instructing is not just about flying, it's also about being on the same level with the student, making sure they understand everything in real time and really feel comfortable in the cockpit, because at the end of the day that student does have to go solo and they need to be comfortable in the cockpit rather than being tense all the time. So these are things that our current team of instructors have spent quite a bit of time actually coaching these instructors who are in the Indigo instructional program. And we feel that that's helped a lot in terms of actually making them comfortable being instructors as well, because I don't think being an instructor is everyone's cup of tea. But yeah, so far we've had a good amount of success with the program. And yeah, and we also, like I mentioned earlier, that once they're done with their instruction after 2 years, their type rating is also taken care of by us and the airline. So yeah, I think it's really a win-win for people coming into the program with Indigo. And yeah, we really feel that it's something that adds a lot of value to both us and Indigo, as well as the general Indian aviation sector.
I fully agree with you, and I think it's such a fantastic initiative that you launched last year. Um, it was very interesting to see. So after the pandemic, you know, Indigo, Air India, Akasa, like came out of the pandemic and just started placing, the world's largest aircraft orders. And a lot of people, including myself, really say when it comes to pilot demand, this decade is going to be, India is going to be kind of like one of the leading drivers in terms of pilot demand. For everyone who is listening, can you give some insights in terms of, you are based in India, you are seeing the demand and supply of pilots being within that ecosystem. Can you share more of your thoughts over how demand and supply for pilots will develop in India? And then, especially maybe not over the next 7, 8 years, but over the next 2 to 3 years, because I know there's a lot of organizations which are looking at India and seeing, oh, India can never have enough pilots, but how is it actually being on the ground?
Yeah. So, currently in terms of the capacity that India has to train pilots, I'm talking about current requirements right now. India only can cater to about 40% of our own requirement. So, there's, and that requirement itself is going to double over the next few years with like you mentioned, the amount of aircraft Air India and Indigo and Akasa have all ordered. That base number is just going to jump so much that there's a huge amount of opportunity in India for, pilot training. Another thing that has really worked in the favor of our industry is the government's really pushed to have training done in India. That's a big thing for the current government, that they really want all flying training to be done in India, which is why you'll see over the last 2 years or so, there's been a lot of FTOs come up, there've been a lot of ATOs come up. There is a lot of expansion in the Indian market that's happening right now. But like I said, we are only catering to 40% of our own requirement today, and that requirement's about to go through the roof. So in terms of opportunity in India, I think the supply of pilots is going to increase significantly coming out of India. Um, and yeah, another thing is with these huge aircraft orders, that is pushing up your requirement for pilots as well. And on top of that, you have a lot of pilots being picked up by Middle Eastern airlines, whether it's Qatar or Etihad or Emirates. They find they like to come to India and pick up, whether it's fresher pilots or senior captains. In both cases, they found that it works for them to pick up people from India. And as a result, that's a almost double supply requirement, because you have first with every aircraft that comes in, you have a demand for a lot more pilots. And then with pilots who are already existing in the ecosystem, either retiring or getting picked up by airlines outside of India, that really, multiplies the requirement for pilots in India. And yeah, I think over the next 2, 3 years, there will be a huge demand for pilots in India.
Uh, I fully agree with you. Um, 2025 though is looking quite interesting until now. So, Akasa Air just came out and said, we have a large number of pilots which are on the ground. So I think some of the Indian airlines, they're still impacted by aircraft delivery delays. And then also, one of the things which we've realized at AFM is that we've always tried to find the number. We haven't found it so far, but that there is hundreds, maybe thousands of aspiring pilots, Indian aspiring pilots, going outside of India and then doing their flight training all over the world, be it in the US or in South Africa, Philippines, and all of these different countries. And I see that also as quite a challenge for the Indian aviation industry because um, you know based on how the airlines are evolving in India and it being fairly consolidated, right? The airlines do have a preference for airline cadet programs and for standards like the ones being produced by Chimes. How do you see the Indian pilot training ecosystem kind of developing in terms of a lot of these individuals which are not joining the cadet programs?
Yeah, so I think you're totally right. I mean, even I was in the US on a work trip about 2 months ago, and visited quite a few flying schools all over the country, whether it was the West Coast, Texas, or the East Coast, and I saw a lot of Indian students there. And I end up chatting with them, and largely the answer I got in terms of why they were in the US and not doing their training in India was simply, we applied in India, but there was no seats available. So yeah, I fully agree with you that India does need to, we as an industry do need to seriously look at expanding both the available seat hours we have. But I think more than that, or along with that, we have to make sure we focus on quality and not just quantity. It's easy to kind of get distracted from quality and just look at, pumping out the numbers. And that may work for a little while, but I don't think that's a sustainable long-term thing to do. In terms of your Indian airlines, yeah, both the two major Indian airlines, Indigo and Air India, have preference for their own cadet program, definitely, because, they get to monitor those students from their ground school all the way to their flying hours, to their type rating, and till they are inducted into the airline. So I think, in that sense, it does make sense for them also to favor that program because they get a wholesome view of their student or their cadet from day one. But yeah, the Indian market in terms of airlines has seriously professionalized as well. So, which is why they're looking at these cadet programs as a serious source of human capital. But if you look at the two airlines, they've taken totally different ways of going about their cadet program. So Air India has currently got partners in the US, but they've just placed an order for 90 plus trainer aircraft, and they're really looking to bring that in-house and do it totally by themselves, which has its own pros and cons. While Indigo has, really kept it out, they've, given it to companies like us. And it's not that they don't monitor, they're very serious about their monitoring. We do submit reports all the time. But, they feel that it's better off to do it like that and focus on running an airline rather than running a flying school. And so I think these are both, two totally different paths that the two airlines have taken. And, so far Indigo's had a very successful cadet program. They've been running it for many years now. Air India's cadet program is much newer, so I guess we'll see how that works out for them.
Do you think we'll see more cadet programs with some of the smaller operators in India?
Um, Yeah, I think once an airline hits a certain size, especially I think right now the third player in the market is Akasa. And I think once they hit a certain size in aircraft, probably around 40 or 50, is when they'd also seriously look at a cadet program. Like you mentioned, Akasa, when they launched, they did really hire a lot of pilots. They also call it timing. They when Go First went down in 2023, and that just gave Akasa a lot of availability of trained pilots, senior pilots, who they did pick up. And because of the issues Boeing has had over the last few years with production of the 737, I think that's hampered Akasa a little bit. but generally they seem to be growing pretty quickly as well. And I think those pilots who have been grounded for the last year or so will be very soon flying, and CASA will have a requirement for a lot more pilots.
I fully agree with you. I think second half of 2025 and then going into 2026, a lot of airframes are going to be delivered to India. If I'm not mistaken, the Airbus CEO previously said that Airbus would be delivering one aircraft to India every single week for the next 10 years, or some like really phenomenal statistic. You know, with all of this growth, you highlighted already some of like the challenges that the Indian flight schools are facing. Uh, can you maybe expand on like the different challenges that the flight training or pilot training industry is expanding, including also that I know one of the main points which is always evaluated is that the Indian aspiring market is very price sensitive. And you know the cost of flight training keeps on going up and up and up, but the consumer, right? You know, it's very like it's already very expensive to finance flight training. But I see that definitely also one of the challenges in India.
Yeah, so one of the major issues that I guess we've already addressed was the shortage of flight instructors, and another issue that has come up in India quite often is a shortage of aircraft. So, until probably 2019, 2018, 2019, Cessna with its 172 and a few 152s completely dominated the Indian training market. You know, there was pretty much no other OEM that was operating in India. Since then, you've had Technam come in. You've had Piper come in a serious way. We were actually Piper's second customer in India and their first customer to give them a fleet order in India. And that has its own challenges in terms of getting aircraft certified, but that pales in comparison to waiting 5 years for a new 172. So that's one thing that India, I think, has addressed quite well, is bringing in new aircraft into the training ecosystem and really making sure that they do well. So the ecosystem has ways to expand. Another challenge in India that the flying training sector does face a lot is, more all the Lycoming engined aircraft operate with 100 LL fuel, and that is really not available in India as such at all. And we've had quite a few times when almost all the flight schools in India shut down because there's just no fuel available. So, we're lucky. I guess, operating since 2008 towards mid 2010s, we kind of saw that, it doesn't make sense that you lose a lot of good flying days just because of a lack of fuel. So we were actually the first FTO in India to bring in Continental engines, which fly on regular ATF. So ATF is, completely available almost everywhere. So that's one thing that we did. And now a lot of flight schools in India have done that, have brought in engines or retrofitted their aircraft with Continental engines to kind of address that shortfall. On the government side as well, they've really pressured oil companies to increase supply of 100 LL as well. So that is something that's being addressed, but everything takes time. So I'm sure that'll also be addressed as we go. And then on the last point that you raised in terms of the cost of flight training, yeah, the cost of flight training has increased exponentially, but now in India, at least, with banks have also come to realize that this is a serious education stream. It's not just people doing it for fun or whatever. And there are jobs available. So financing's become a lot easier to come by in terms of getting financing for your training. We are also in talks with a company right now to provide funding for our courses as well. Hopefully, we'll be announcing that pretty soon. And yeah, and also, while the cost of the program has gone up, also salaries for once you've qualified have also increased quite a bit. So, in terms of your payback from education, I would say, getting a CPL and getting a job at an airline is probably one of the quickest routes to paying back a education loan versus a 4-year college degree where you kind of it takes a much longer time to actually earn that money to pay back your education loans.
Yeah, I think also once again we noticed that especially after the pandemic, like student financing in India for flight training became more and more popular, but once again very heavily geared towards structured programs where there was some sort of visibility on employment opportunities. Um, I know through AFM that Chimes is very unique because not only is it a preferred pilot training partner for Indigo, but that it is also a preferred pilot training partner for international organizations which are training Indian pilots, which are going back to India and then need to convert their license. Can you just share for everyone who is listening, which is mostly an international audience, kind of what Chimes offers in that regard?
Yeah, sure. So, when a student comes back from the US or anywhere else really, they have to convert their license. It's a foreign license in India, so they have to convert it to a DGCA license in India. So, a lot of people who work with Indian students and come to us to do that conversion flying because they've found that they've tried their hand with a lot of different FTOs in India, but they've found that when we call a student and we tell them you'll be doing your flying in the next 5 days, they actually get it done in the next 5 days. So, again, it's about building that reputation that's taken us a lot of time, I mean, an effort. So, today, a lot of the large flying schools in the US, in Australia, South Africa, we're their first port of call in terms of getting their students' licenses converted. Because, now they have that faith in us that if we tell them it'll take you 1 month to get 10 students done, they know that at the end of that 1 month they will have their 10 students done. So that's also become a fairly large revenue stream for us in terms of bringing in cadets from abroad and getting their licenses converted with us. It's about 15 hours of flying that they require to do to get their license converted. And yeah, that's been a large opportunity that we've been happy to address.
Yeah, I think also it's a really great initiative by the Indian regulator and by the Indian government to ensure, right, provide like a really good pillar for which Indian flight training organizations can grow on. I know that you are also a fan of our platform and kind of helping you stay up to date with what's happening in the global pilot training industry. Um, for everyone who's listening, how do you use AFM? Kind of, what do you really enjoy about it, and kind of what value do you extract from it?
Sure. So, I always have my AFM tab open on my browser, and it's great to see all the, latest news from. I mean, I focus largely on flying training, but I do also look, there's so much information in terms of general aviation, general investments that have been happening in the aviation sector. ATOs, flying schools, and it's good. It's great to get a download of what's happening in global aviation from AFM. And of course, you had your AFM summit in Dubai a while ago, and that was huge value add for us. We got to meet a lot of people from all over the world who are doing incredible things in aviation, and see what they're doing, hear what they're doing, and really learn from that. So AFM's really contributed to, and especially for me, since I don't come from a aviation background as such, that for me, just learning how people are doing it around the world has really been eye-opening, and that's all thanks to the knowledge I get from AFM.
So I'm excited to say that in a couple of months, we're going to roll out like a custom platform. So it's going to make browsing AFM and kind of researching different topics of interest so much easier. Um, Most people don't even know that we have this feature yet, but we even have kind of keyword alerts. So for anyone who's interested, for example, in Indian flight training or Indian flight schools, they can just put it in, and then automatically they will receive an email when anything like that is covered on AFM. Uh, Dev, I know that Chimes is tremendously growing over the next couple of years, but is really focused on kind of that, safety and efficient, high quality training. Is there any organizations that you're keen with on connecting? Is there really something that you want to share in regards to what makes Chimes special and kind of maybe collaborations that you're seeking at Chimes?
Yeah, I mean, we're always open to learning from what people are doing all over the world, especially, OEMs in terms of aircraft manufacturers, whether it's training aircraft manufacturers or, large aircraft manufacturers like Airbus or Boeing. We're always keen to kind of learn what they're doing because it has ripple effects for us as well. If, say, an Airbus, introduces some new technology, we have to kind of adapt to that because we have to make sure our cadets are capable of handling that kind of technology. So, always excited to meet these aircraft OEMs. Also, flight schools from around the world, people are always doing interesting things. Some people are introducing new softwares, whether it's for tracking flying hours, whether it's through their maintenance or just making sure their students are on time. So yeah, just happy to kind of learn from what people are doing and hopefully adopt best practices.
Perfect. Dev, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. If anyone wants to learn more about Chimes Aviation Academy, please check out their website. It is www.caaaindia.com. So Chimes Aviation Academy, caaaindia.com, or connect with Dev Punj on LinkedIn. You can also check out all of Chimes Aviation Academy's, or I hope all of Chimes Aviation Academy's latest announcements on www.afm.aero. But Dev, thank you very much for sharing the insights. And I hope that maybe in 3 or 4 years, we will do another interview when Chimes will cross the 100 fleet aircraft mark.
Well, thanks very much for having me, Max. And yeah, I hope we get to that mark sooner than that. But let's see how it goes. And yeah, I don't think we have to wait for that occasion to do another interview. I'm happy to join you anytime. And it was a pleasure to be on your podcast. And I look forward to many more.
Thank you, Dev.